There's a special rule in my family. No matter what I do, I have to get permission from my younger sister Burnett Emerson first. However, Burnett dies the year I turn 5. So every time I ask Mom for something, she lights a candle and tells me if the candle goes out within 1 minute, that means Burnett has agreed to it. But the candle never goes out on its own. I've never worn pretty dresses or gone to amusement parks. I have no idea what cake tastes like either. Sometimes when I get sick, I can't even go to the hospital because Burnett hasn't given me permission. My vision is impaired and I have a severe gastric problem. Every time I show even a hint of dissatisfaction, Mom will scream at me, if it weren't for you back then. You owe her this much, so you have no right to complain. At least you're still getting fed, aren't you? But what about her? She's already buried 6 feet under. Eventually, I believe I'm the reason Burnett died, and that thought has haunted me for most of my life. Later on, I make a deal with death, trading my life for hers. I will return to the past and die in Burnett's place. After death, my soul drifts back home. I see Mom hugging Burnett with joyful tears rolling down her cheeks. It's all my fault for putting disinfectant in a juice bottle. Still, it's a good thing Dahlia got to it first. If you'd been the one who drank it instead, I wouldn't know how to live with that. My birthday wish when I turned 18 was to adopt Pepper, a stray cat in our neighborhood. After all the 10 minutes I spent playing with Pepper on my way home from school every day were the only time I felt alive. I knew Mom wouldn't agree to it, but I still mustered my courage and made the suggestion. As expected, Mom flew into a rage. Your sister died and was robbed of everything she could have had, but you want to use my hard-earned money to feed a worthless stray? How on earth did I end up with such a wretched daughter like you? Lowering my head, I insisted, Pepper is a good cat. He can catch mice and he doesn't eat a lot. It won't cost much to feed him. I can save up some pocket money to buy food for him. Then she started pacing around in circles with her hands on her hips. If you can be so nice to a mere animal, why were you so cruel to your sister back then? Remember, you're the one who killed your sister. So you deserve to spend the rest of your life drowning in guilt. You have no right to be happy. She jabbed a finger at my forehead. Why couldn't it have been you who died back then? Mom said I was being naughty. I had filled a juice bottle with disinfectant and told my sister, Burnett Emerson, to drink it. Burnett was rushed to the hospital to have her stomach pumped, but she still didn't survive. That was how we lost her. I was too young back then, so I actually didn't remember much of it. But since everyone told me that was what happened, I believed them. The crushing guilt weighing on my heart was suffocating. So no matter what Mom said, I would choose to silently bear it. But this time I wanted to stand my ground. The security guard said he'll be taking the stray cats to an animal shelter soon. If I don't bring Pepper home before then, I won't get to see him ever again. Also, it's my 18th birthday, Mom. Can't you grant this one wish of mine? All my classmates said turning 18 was an important event. On their 18th birthday, no matter what they asked for, their parents would give it to them. So now why was Mom so mad that even her eyes had turned red? As always, Mom lit a candle in a corner of the room. Fine, I know you're not going to listen anyway. Go ask your sister. Then my gaze darkened. For as long as I could remember, the candle had never once gone out. I stared at the burning candle silently, counting in my mind 1, 2, 3. As soon as I counted to 60, Mom put the candle away. Alright, that's a full minute. Your sister doesn't agree. This conversation is over. If I see even a single cat hair in this house, you know what's coming. That night I had a fitful sleep. Even when I did fall asleep, I kept having nightmares. In my dreams, after Pepper was taken to the animal shelter, the bigger cats ganged up on him and he cried so much that it broke my heart. In another scene, Pepper didn't go to the animal shelter. Instead, he was sent to the slaughterhouse. His fate there was too horrifying to describe. I even dreamed about bringing Pepper home. But then Burnett stood next to me asking me, as blood gushed from her eyes, Dahlia, how can you be so kind to a cat but so heartless that you'd want me dead? Next day, I spent all my pocket money on Pepper's favorite cat treat. But when I got back to the neighborhood, I couldn't find him anywhere. Mom suddenly appeared behind me. Stop calling for that cat. I just told the property management that the cat is hurting the residents. I stood right there and watched them kill him and toss him in the bin. Pulling out her phone, Mom took a step in my direction. Do you want to see? I covered my ears and let out a scream. No. Fearing that I might see Pepper's mangled body, I turned around and ran upstairs. Before I realized it, I had run all the way up to the roof and I found myself standing on the very edge of the building. At that moment, I suddenly couldn't find any reason to keep living anymore. I was suddenly in free fall, and the wind whipped past my ears. I met Death himself. Death said he was just passing by and he could make a deal with me. According to your original fate, some branches will break your fall, and the bones in your right leg will shatter. You'll survive, but that's too boring. So why don't you make a deal with me? I'll move those annoying branches away so you'll be smashed into pieces. Then you'll trade your life to bring your sister back. I nodded almost immediately. I'll do it. If Burnett were still alive, Mom wouldn't have a reason to hate me anymore. So even if I died, I would be happy as long as Mom loved me. My lips curved into a faint smile. Suddenly, a white light flashed before my eyes. I was sent back in time to when I was 5 years old. This time, I was the one lying on the hospital bed getting my stomach pumped instead. Burnett was running and jumping around in the hospital corridor outside. I still remembered that when the doctor pronounced Burnett dead, Mom had broken down in tears outside the ward. She crouched down until she was at eye level with me, then screamed hysterically, "Why would you put disinfectant in a juice bottle?" I was shocked out of my wits. And even though it happened just moments ago, I couldn't remember the exact details of the incident. I only remembered Burnett suddenly foaming at the mouth right in front of me, her face pale. I didn't say anything. Then Mom began pulling at her own hair. Why did I even bother going out? Why didn't I stay home to keep an eye on the kids? Dad tried to comfort her, but she immediately snapped at him. "You were driving too slow. If you had gone faster, our daughter wouldn't have died." Later on, Mom would even divorce Dad for that very reason. The light above the operating room went out. The doctor came out and took off his mask. "I'm sorry for your loss. We did everything we could." I turned around a little nervously, looking at Mom with a hint of expectation. But Mom seemed extremely calm and she just let out a faint sigh. "Thank you for your hard work, doctor." I was still holding out hope. I remembered my teacher saying that when some people experienced extreme sorrow, sometimes they wouldn't be able to cry. Instead, they would stay unusually calm. However, Mom turned to look at Dad saying, "Why would Dahlia drink that out of the blue? What a glutton. Burnett is just a year younger than Dahlia. But she's so much better behaved." Well, at least Dahlia didn't make it. If she got into the ICU, she'd be dragging us all down with her. I heard that even a day in the ICU costs a fortune. We just saved up some cash to get Burnett a piano, so we can't have that money spent on Dahlia. Instead, Dad patted Mom on the shoulder. He didn't agree or go along with it. He simply said, "Come on, let's make preparations for the funeral." For a long time, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pain tore through me as I thought, this can't be happening. It shouldn't play out like this. Mom should have been in utter agony. Wait, is this because I was the one who died instead of Burnett? I suddenly realized a truth I didn't want to admit. Mom only cared about Burnett. Suddenly, Burnett came pattering over. She wrapped her arms around Mom's leg and looked up at her. "Mom, what's Dahlia doing in there? Why isn't she coming out?" "I'm hungry." Mom bent over and picked Burnett up. Her annoyance from just now had disappeared, and she said in an extremely gentle tone, "What would you like to eat, Burnett? Let's have that for dinner, alright?" She was heading outside with Burnett in her arms when she suddenly turned around and glanced at the operating room. She looked like she had suddenly remembered something. She said, "Well, I guess I'm partly to blame for this. I filled a juice bottle with disinfectant, but I forgot to warn the kids about it. I'm so glad Burnett wasn't the one who drank it. If not, I would have never forgiven myself." I floated in the air as I watched my family walk away. Thought so. I didn't even cause Burnett's death. Mom was the culprit all along, and she blamed it all on me just to make herself feel better. The one thing I was incredibly reluctant to admit was that Mom never loved me at all. Returning to my senses, I drifted outside. I happened to hear Dad comforting Mom. "This isn't your fault. If Dahlia weren't such a glutton, this wouldn't have happened." Dad didn't care about me either. He seemed rational and calm as he began writing my obituary and making the funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, Burnett was singing cheerfully in Mom's arms. After I died, the household became more peaceful than ever. At my funeral, whenever someone asked about how I died, Mom kept telling them I was being too greedy and mistook disinfectant for a drink. Aunt Greta discreetly pulled Mom aside. "You're the one who put the disinfectant in the wrong bottle, so how could you blame her for not knowing better? The child's already dead, so we should honor her. We can't even rest in peace if you keep saying that." Mom didn't seem too bothered by it. "She's already dead, so why does it matter if she's at peace or not? Do you seriously want me to tell everyone that it was my fault?" I smiled bitterly. After Burnett died, Mom constantly thought about her and all the things she could have had. But now that I was the one who died, she just shrugged it off. Death suddenly showed up. He asked me, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. There was no point in dragging out a life filled with nothing but pain. I'm just glad that I could trade my life for Burnett's, so she can keep living a happy and innocent life. Burnett suddenly asked Mom, "What's Dahlia doing? Why won't she get up and play with me?" Mom thought about it for a moment. Then she asked earnestly, "Burnett, you may not get to see Dahlia ever again. Do you feel sad about it?" Burnett carefully thought about what Mom meant. Soon she clapped her hands and said joyfully, "Yay, I don't have to share my toys ever again. I can have the room all to myself." My heart sank. No one in my family cared about me at all. Death seemed more upset about it than I was. "Let's make another deal. I'll talk to your mom in a dream. If she shows even a hint of guilt towards you, I can restore everything to the way it was before you jumped off the building. Child, would you like to make that wager with me?" I nodded. After thinking for a moment, I asked, "Can we turn the bet around? If Mom doesn't feel any guilt toward me, you'll let things return to their original course." Death didn't quite understand. "Can be done, but are you sure you really want that? Honestly, I've never seen a mother this heartless. She may love your sister more, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you at all. right? I nodded firmly. I've made up my mind. If Mom feels any guilt, it means she still loves me, even if it's just a tiny bit. I won't regret what I'm doing. But if she still doesn't care about me at all, I can go on living for myself without any burdens. Death agreed. That night Mom had a long dream. I saw her frowning deeply in her sleep. Death told me that Mom saw Burnett passing away after resuscitation efforts failed. And she also saw how I resigned myself to the cruelty I faced. Lastly, she saw me making a deal with Death without any hesitation. Death told me that even he himself was touched. Your mom can't possibly stay indifferent after all that. You're losing the bet. I forced a smile on my lips, but I didn't say anything. Suddenly Mom opened her eyes. I felt a little anxious as I watched her. She quickly got out of bed. She scrambled to open the door, then ran to the room I shared with Burnett. She took a deep breath and mustered her courage before opening the door. Mom's eyes swept across the room. The little bed by the window was empty. The blanket was folded neatly because there was no one left to mess it up. She stood there in silence for a long moment. My heart trembled. Then Mom let out a long breath of relief. Thank goodness. Death's smile disappeared. Mom leaned against the doorframe, pressing a hand against her racing heart. It was only a dream. If Burnett had died instead, her voice shook, I would have gone insane. She looked at my empty bed again. As for Dahlia, children recover from being scolded. She would have forgotten everything after a few days. But Burnett, her eyes softened. Burnett is different. She quietly closed the bedroom door. I almost scared myself to death. I can't let that happen. The tiny hope I had been protecting finally shattered. Death lowered his head. You won the wager. No, I whispered. I lost. Death snapped his fingers. The world around us shattered like glass. I opened my eyes. The sharp smell of disinfectant filled my nose. My right leg was wrapped in thick plaster. Every bone in my body ached. I was back. Back after jumping from the rooftop. Back to being 18 years old. A nurse noticed I was awake. You're finally conscious. You were lucky. Tree branches slowed your fall. Your parents finished the payment this morning. I laughed quietly. Of course. Not because they cared. If I died, someone had to pay the hospital first before claiming the body. The nurse hesitated. Your mother said. Once you're awake, call her. I picked up the phone beside the bed. Mom answered almost instantly. Before I could speak, she shouted. Dahlia, do you know how much money you've wasted? The surgery alone cost over $30,000. If you wanted to die, couldn't you have done it somewhere else? Now your sister's piano lessons have to be postponed because of you. Click. She hung up. The ward fell completely silent. Even the nurse froze. Her face slowly turned pale. I'm sorry. I simply smiled. It's okay. No one owes me an apology. Guys, now, I finally understood. I had spent 13 years trying to earn something that had never existed. Their love. That afternoon, Aunt Greta rushed into the hospital carrying a bag of fruit. The moment she saw me, her eyes turned red. My poor child. She carefully hugged me without touching my injured leg. What happened to you? I lowered my head. I accidentally fell. Aunt Greta's expression darkened. I called your mother. She said you're just pretending to be pitiful. My smile didn't change. That's just how she is. Aunt Greta suddenly gripped my shoulders. Dahlia, come live with me. I stared at her. What? I've watched that woman mistreat you for 13 years. I should have taken you away sooner. I've already spoken with a lawyer. If you're willing, I'll become your guardian until you're an adult. You only have a few more months before college anyway. You don't have to go back. Tears finally rolled down my face. Not because of my parents, but because someone had finally chosen me. Far away, Death watched everything with a satisfied smile. He whispered, Child, the life you traded away, you've earned it back. And this time, live for yourself. For the first time in my life, I didn't immediately agree. Would Aunt Greta really want me? Aunt Greta laughed through her tears. What kind of silly question is that? She gently wiped my face. When you were little, I begged your parents to let you stay with me for a while. Your mother refused. She said you had to stay home and remember what you'd done to Burnett. I froze. I was 5. Aunt Greta's eyes filled with anger. Exactly. What kind of monster blames a 5-year-old for an accident caused by an adult? You couldn't even reach the kitchen counter. Do you know what your mother told me? If Dahlia suffers every day, maybe she'll never become selfish again. My fingers slowly tightened around the blanket. So, even then, it had never been about Burnett. It was punishment. Punishment for making Mom face her own mistake. Aunt Greta took a deep breath. I've kept quiet for too many years. Not anymore. The next morning, she wheeled me out of the hospital herself. Mom was already waiting outside. The moment she saw Aunt Greta, her face darkened. What are you doing here? I'm taking Dahlia home. Mom snorted. Good. She broke her leg. You can deal with her for a few days. Aunt Greta didn't move. I said I'm taking her home. My home. Mom frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? Aunt Greta pulled several documents from her bag. Dahlia is 18 now. She can decide where she wants to live. And she's decided. Mom looked at me. Dahlia, stop causing trouble. Your sister has piano this afternoon. I don't have time for your tantrum. I quietly met her eyes. I'm leaving. Mom stared at me in disbelief. Then she laughed. Fine. You'll be back within 3 days. You can't even cook. You can barely take care of yourself. You'll come crawling back. I didn't answer. For the first time in 18 years, I turned my wheelchair around and left without looking back. That evening Aunt Greta made a table full of food. Sweet and sour ribs, tomato eggs, steamed fish, braised chicken. She nervously rubbed her hands together. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made a little of everything. I stared at the table. I don't know what I like. Everyone fell silent. I've never really been allowed to choose. Aunt Greta bit her lip. Then she smiled softly. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. She picked up a small slice of chocolate cake. One more thing. Happy 18th birthday, sweetheart. I looked at the tiny candle burning on top. No one told me to wait a minute. No one asked Burnett for permission. No one threatened to take it away. Aunt Greta simply smiled. Make a wish. My hands began shaking. I've never had birthday cake before. The room became completely silent. Aunt Greta covered her mouth. Her husband quietly turned away, his eyes red. Death, standing invisibly by the window, closed his eyes. I blew out the candle. The flame disappeared instantly. No permission was needed. No one stopped me. I took my first bite. It was sweet. So sweet that I burst into tears. Within a week, Dahlia officially moved in with Aunt Greta. Mom never came looking for her. Instead she called only once. Dahlia, your sister's piano competition is coming up. Come home and clean the house before the guests arrive. Dahlia calmly replied, I'm not coming back. Mom scoffed. Stop throwing a tantrum. She hung up without waiting for an answer. 3 months later, Dahlia was accepted into a university with a full scholarship. Aunt Greta happily took her shopping for clothes, a laptop and dorm supplies. Everything Dahlia had never been allowed to have. On move-in day, Aunt Greta hugged her tightly. You don't owe anyone your happiness. For the first time Dahlia believed those words. Meanwhile, Burnett's spoiled behavior only grew worse. With no one left to blame or order around, she became demanding and selfish. She screamed at teachers, bullied classmates, and quit piano after insisting it was too hard. Mom defended her every time. My daughter is perfect. Everyone else is jealous. Dad watched silently as Burnett's grades plummeted, and the household fell into constant arguments. One evening he quietly asked, Do you ever think we were too hard on Dahlia? Mom's face instantly darkened. Don't start. If she hadn't been so greedy, none of this would have happened. Dad looked at her for a long time before saying nothing more. Years passed. Dahlia graduated at the top of her class and built a successful career. She surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared about her, and eventually adopted 2 rescue cats. One of them was Orange. She named him Pepper. On the day she brought him home, she smiled through her tears. This time, no one can take you away. Across town, Burnett dropped out of college after repeatedly getting into trouble. Mom exhausted her savings cleaning up one mess after another. Only then did she occasionally think of Dahlia, not because she missed her, but because Dahlia had always quietly cleaned up after everyone. One rainy afternoon, Mom unexpectedly saw Dahlia walking down the street. She looked healthy, confident. She was laughing with Aunt Greta while carrying bags of cat food. There wasn't a trace of the timid girl who used to beg for permission to be happy. Mom instinctively called out, Dahlia. Dahlia paused. She turned around politely. Mrs. Emerson. The title struck Mom harder than a slap. I haven't been in Emerson for a long time. Then Dahlia smiled, took Aunt Greta's arm, and walked away without looking back. For the rest of her life she never returned to that house. And this time she never once wondered whether her mother had ever loved her, because she no longer needed the answer. A year later Mom received a lawyer's letter. Dahlia had legally changed her last name. She was now Dahlia Green, taking Aunt Greta's family name. Mom crumpled the papers. She's really doing this? Dad quietly replied. You were the one who kept telling her she wasn't your daughter. Mom fell silent. Not long afterward, Burnett was arrested for seriously injuring a classmate during a fight. The victim's parents refused to settle. The compensation was enormous. Mom ran everywhere trying to borrow money. Every relative gave the same answer. You spent 18 years saying Dahlia was worthless. Ask your favorite daughter. Mom finally remembered Dahlia. She found the company where Dahlia worked and waited outside until she got off work. Dahlia. Dahlia stopped. She looked at the exhausted woman in front of her. What do you need? Mom forced a smile. Burnett made a mistake. Can you lend us some money? Dahlia answered without hesitation. No. Mom froze. You won't even help your own sister? My sister. Dahlia smiled faintly. I remember someone telling me I had no right to be happy because I killed her. But she's alive. So according to you, I don't have a sister. Mom's lips trembled. Dahlia. Before she could finish, Aunt Greta walked over. She stood protectively beside Dahlia. My daughter already answered. Please don't bother her again. The words my daughter made Mom's face turn white. She watched helplessly as the two of them left together. That night, she sat alone in the empty living room. For the first time she noticed something strange. The corner where she used to light candles for Burnett's permission was covered in dust. She suddenly remembered a tiny 5-year-old Dahlia standing there every day, staring at the flame with hopeful eyes. 1, 2, 3. Waiting for a miracle that never came. Mom covered her face. Not because she suddenly became a good mother, but because she finally realized something. The obedient little girl who had once loved her unconditionally was gone forever, and this time, no amount of tears could bring her back. Years later, the Emerson family disappeared from everyone's conversations. Burnett never changed. After repeated fights, fraud, and mounting debts, she drove drunk one rainy night and crashed into a bridge. She survived but was left permanently disabled. Even then, she blamed everyone except herself. Mom spent every remaining dollar paying Burnett's debts and medical bills. The piano she had once treasured was sold. The house was sold. Even then, Burnett complained that her mother wasn't doing enough. Dad finally filed for divorce. As he packed his belongings, he quietly said, I lost one daughter because I was too weak to protect her. It won't change anything now. He left with nothing but a suitcase. Mom was left alone caring for the daughter she had sacrificed everything for. Only then did she understand what Aunt Greta had once tried to tell her. Favoritism wasn't love. It was poison. On the other side of the city, Dahlia's life was peaceful. She had become a veterinarian, determined that no abandoned animal would suffer the way Pepper had. Every weekend, she volunteered at local shelters with Aunt Greta. Her home was always full of rescued cats. One of them loved curling up on her lap whenever she read by the window. Every year on her birthday, Aunt Greta baked her a chocolate cake. No candles of permission. No guilt. No accusations. Only one sentence. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Every year Dahlia smiled a little more easily. One spring afternoon, she visited the cemetery. She placed fresh flowers on a small grave. Burnett, I don't hate you anymore. You were just a child. The adults were the ones who failed us. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. For the first time in her life, Dahlia felt completely at peace. Behind her, Death watched quietly. He smiled. You finally kept your promise. Dahlia looked up. My promise? To live for yourself. She smiled. I almost forgot. Death chuckled. That's how I know you've truly healed. As he disappeared into the sunlight, his final words drifted on the wind. Some children spend their whole lives trying to earn a parent's love. But love that must be earned was never love to begin with. Dahlia took Aunt Greta's hand and walked away from the cemetery without looking back. Ahead of her was the family who had chosen her. Behind her was the family who never did. And this time she never turned around again.